The morning mist hung low over the manicured lawns of Silver Oaks Estates, a neighborhood where the grass was required to be exactly 2.5 inches tall and the mailboxes were all painted the same shade of Pebble Shore gray. In the center of this quiet cul-de-sac lived Elias Thorne, a 68-year-old retired Coast Guard chief warrant officer. Elias was a man of quiet habits. He woke at 500, brewed a pot of coffee blacker than a North Atlantic storm and sat on his back porch to watch the sun rise. He liked the silence. After 30 years of navigating treacherous waters, managing unruly crews, and staring down the raw power of the ocean, he felt he had earned a bit of peace. However, in Silver Oaks, peace was a commodity regulated by the Homeowners Association, and the self-appointed gatekeeper of that peace was Brenda Sterling. To the residents of Silver Oaks, Brenda was known as the HOA Queen. She didn't just walk the streets, she patrolled them. Armed with a clipboard, a digital caliper for measuring grass, and a scowl that could curdle milk, Brenda saw herself as the thin line between civilization and suburban anarchy. The conflict began on a Tuesday. The warning shot. Elias was in his driveway buffing the chrome on his 1968 Boston Whaler. The boat was his pride and joy, a relic of his youth that he had meticulously restored. It sat on a clean, well-maintained trailer tucked neatly beside his garage. The shadow of a clipboard fell over the hull. "Mr. Thorne," Brenda said, her voice sounding like two pieces of sandpaper rubbing together. Elias didn't look up. "Morning, Brenda, beautiful day for the water." "The water is irrelevant," she snapped. Article 4, Section B of the Silver Oaks Covenant states that recreational vessels, including but not limited to motorboats, shall not be visible from the street for a period exceeding 24 hours. Elias finally straightened his back, his joints popping like dry twigs. He was a tall man weathered by salt and sun, with eyes that had seen too much to be intimidated by a woman in a floral visor. "She's been here 18 hours, Brenda. I'm taking her out to the bay tomorrow morning. I'm well within the window." Brenda leaned in, her eyes narrowing. "The window is closing, Mr. Thorne, and frankly, the vintage look of this vessel is bringing down the aesthetic value of the cul-de-sac. It looks industrial." "It's a classic," Elias said calmly, "and it's on my property." Brenda smiled, a cold, thin expression that didn't reach her eyes. "In Silver Oaks, Mr. Thorne, your property is a privilege granted by the community, and the community is losing patience." She marched away, her sensible flats clicking rhythmically on the asphalt. Elias watched her go, a familiar instinct stirring in his gut. In the Coast Guard, you learned to read the clouds. You knew when a squall was brewing long before the first drop of rain hit the deck. Brenda Sterling wasn't just a nuisance, she was a storm. The gathering storm. Over the next month, the citations began to rain down on Elias' mailbox like confetti. Citation 912, trash bins visible for 2 hours past collection time. Citation 915, flowerbed mulch color light sienna does not match the approved dark umber. Citation 922, backyard bird feeder deemed a nuisance structure attracting unauthorized wildlife. Elias paid the fines. He didn't want the drama, he just wanted to be left alone. But the more he complied, the more Brenda pushed. She didn't want his compliance, she wanted his total submission. The breaking point came in October. Elias' oldest friend and fellow veteran, Sam, had passed away. Sam had been a mechanic in the Coast Guard, the kind of man who could fix a diesel engine with a paperclip and a piece of chewing gum. In his will, Sam had left Elias his most prized possession, a flagpole. It wasn't just any flagpole, it was a 20-foot brushed aluminum beauty, and on it sat a brass eagle that had once graced a station house in Maine. Elias spent a Saturday afternoon installing it in his front yard. He did it by the book, poured a deep concrete base, leveled it perfectly, and at sunset he raised the American flag along with the Coast Guard ensign. He stood at attention, gave a sharp salute to his fallen friend, and felt a rare moment of contentment. He wasn't 20 minutes back inside his house before his doorbell rang. It wasn't a normal ring, it was a frantic, rhythmic pounding. He opened the door to find Brenda, breathless, her face the color of a ripe beet. Behind her stood 2 other members of the HOA board, a timid man named Harold and a woman named Janice who refused to make eye contact. "Take it down," Brenda hissed. Elias leaned against the doorframe. "Take what down, Brenda?" That pole, it's an eyesore, it's a violation of the height restrictions, and it makes a metallic clanging sound in the wind, it's noise pollution. It's a flagpole, Elias said, his voice dropping an octave, the tone he used when a junior seaman was about to do something dangerous. There are federal laws protecting the display of the flag, Brenda, the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005. Look it up. I don't care about federal law, Brenda screamed, her voice echoing through the quiet street. Neighbors began to peek through their blinds. This is a private community, we have our own laws, that pole is an unauthorized structure on community property. Elias frowned, community property, this is my front lawn, I pay the mortgage, I pay the taxes. Brenda stepped onto his grass, her heels sinking into the turf. She pointed a trembling finger at the ground. Everything from the curb to the house is subject to HOA oversight. We own the aesthetic, we own the view. In essence, Mr. Thorne, this is community property and I want that pole gone by Monday or we will have it removed forcibly. Elias looked at her, then at the silent board members and finally at the small, inconspicuous button on his lapel. You're sure about that, Brenda? He asked softly. You're sure this is community property and you have the right to come onto my land and take what you want? I am the president of this association, she shrieked. I have the right to do whatever is necessary to maintain the standards of Silver Oaks. You're just a stubborn old man who thinks his service gives him a pass. It doesn't. Your boat is a tub, your flag is a nuisance, and you are a blight. Elias didn't get angry, he didn't raise his voice. He simply reached into his pocket and turned off the small digital recorder he had been carrying. Have a nice evening, Brenda, he said and closed the door. The chief's maneuver. Elias knew that in any conflict, information was the most valuable currency. Brenda Sterling had spent years bullying the residents of Silver Oaks because they were afraid of her. They were afraid of the fines, the lawsuits, and the social ostracization. But Elias wasn't afraid. He had been through far worse than a suburban HOA president. That night, Elias sat at his computer. He wasn't just a retired veteran, he was a man who had spent decades writing detailed incident reports that had to hold up in federal court. He began to compile his log of harassment. He had video from his doorbell camera of Brenda measuring his grass with a ruler at 3 in the morning. He had audio of her screaming that she didn't care about federal law. He had copies of every fine he had paid, juxtaposed with photos of other houses in the neighborhood, houses owned by Brenda's friends that had the exact same violations but were never cited. But he needed one more thing, he needed the smoking gun. He called his nephew Marcus, who was a real estate attorney. Marcus, Elias said, I need you to pull the original plat map for Silver Oaks, specifically the easement and property line details for Lot 42. What are you up to, Uncle Elias? Marcus laughed, going to war. No, Elias said, looking out at the flag waving in the moonlight, just performing a little salvage operation. The ambush. 2 weeks later, the HOA held its monthly meeting in the community clubhouse. Usually these meetings were attended by 5 or 6 board residents, but tonight the room was packed. Word had spread that Brenda was going to move for a forced abatement of Elias Thorne's flagpole. Brenda sat at the front table looking like a queen on her throne. She hammered her gavel on the table. Order, we have a lot to get through. The main item on the agenda is the ongoing violation at Lot 42. Mr. Thorne has refused to remove his unauthorized structure. As president, I am moving to authorize a contractor to enter the property on Wednesday to remove the pole and seize the boat as collateral for unpaid fines. A murmur went through the crowd. Is Mr. Thorne here? Brenda asked, looking around with a smirk. Elias stood up from the back of the room. He was dressed in his full Coast Guard service dress blue uniform. The medals on his chest, the Meritorious Service Medal, the Coast Guard Commendation Medal glinted under the fluorescent lights. The room went dead silent. I'm here, Brenda, Elias said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room without effort. Mr. Thorne, you're out of uniform for a neighborhood meeting, Brenda mocked, though she looked slightly unsettled. This isn't a parade. No, Elias said, walking slowly toward the front. It's a deck plate inspection, and I've found some significant leaks in your ship. Sit down, Elias, you're in violation. Actually, Elias said, reaching the front and placing a thick folder on the table. You are. I've spent the last 2 weeks doing some research. You see, Brenda, you've been telling me for months that my yard is community property. You've used that phrase to justify trespassing, harassment, and attempted theft of my personal property. It's in the bylaws, Brenda shouted. No, it isn't, Elias countered. He opened the folder and pulled out a large architectural map. This is the original land survey for Silver Oaks filed with the county in 1994, Marcus. Marcus stood up from the side of the room. According to the county records, the common area easements in this neighborhood end exactly 12 feet from the curb. My uncle's flagpole is 22 feet from the curb, his boat is 30 feet from the curb. You have zero legal jurisdiction over that portion of his land. Brenda's face went pale. That's a technicality, the spirit of the covenant. Let's talk about the spirit of the covenant, Elias interrupted. He pulled out a small remote and pointed it at the clubhouse's projector system. He had spent the afternoon borrowing the clubhouse Wi-Fi. Suddenly, Brenda's voice filled the room. It was the recording from the night on Elias' porch. I don't care about federal law. This is a private community. We have our own laws. I am the president of this association. I have the right to do whatever is necessary. The recording continued, playing a montage of Brenda's greatest hits. It played audio of her telling Janice that they would fine the old man until he had to sell the house just to pay them. It showed doorbell footage of her kicking Elias' cat, which she missed, but the intent was clear. The residents in the room began to boo. Someone yelled, "You're a bully, Brenda." That's illegal, Brenda screamed, standing up so fast her chair fell over. You can't record me without my permission. This is a two-party consent state. Elias smiled. It was the smile of a man who had navigated a ship through a hurricane. Actually, Brenda, you should check your own bylaws. Article 12 states that all common areas of the Silver Oaks Clubhouse and exterior streets are subject to 24-hour security monitoring for the safety of the community. Since you were standing on what you claimed was community property, you had no expectation of privacy. You gave yourself permission when you stepped on my grass. The room erupted in laughter. The climax. Brenda looked at the board members. Harold was looking at his shoes. Janice was already packing her bag. I'm not done, Elias said, his voice cutting through the noise. I've also had Marcus look into the HOA's financial records, the ones you're required to make public but haven't updated in 3 years. It seems that the fines I've been paying haven't been going into the Community Improvement Fund. They've been going into a consulting account owned by Sterling Properties. That's your brother's company, isn't it, Brenda? The silence that followed was heavy. This wasn't just about a flagpole anymore. This was about embezzlement. Brenda reached for her gavel, but her hand was shaking too much to grab it. I can explain that. It was for landscaping oversight. The only thing you've been overseeing is your own ego, Elias said. He looked out at his neighbors. I've spent my life serving a country that believes in the rule of law, not the rule of bullies. I'm not just asking for Brenda's resignation. I'm presenting this file to the district attorney tomorrow morning. Unless, of course, the board would like to dissolve itself tonight and appoint an interim committee to conduct a full audit. The timid man, Harold, suddenly stood up. I second that. I've had enough of this. Brenda, give me the gavel. No, Brenda cried. You can't do this. I made this neighborhood. I kept the property values up. You made this neighborhood a prison, a woman from the back row shouted. Elias fought for our country. The least we can do is let him fly the flag. The vote was unanimous. Brenda Sterling was stripped of her presidency. She tried to storm out with her head held high, but she tripped over the cord of the projector, the very one playing the video of her own meltdown. The resolution. A month later, the air in Silver Oaks felt different. The Pebble Shore gray mailboxes were starting to be replaced by colors like deep sea blue and sunset orange. The grass was still green, but no one was out with a ruler at 3 in the morning. Elias was back in his driveway working on the Boston Whaler. The flagpole stood tall and proud, the brass eagle catching the afternoon light. The metallic clanging of the halyard against the pole, the sound Brenda had called noise pollution, sounded like music to him. A car pulled up. It was Harold, the new interim president. Morning, Elias, Harold said, leaning out the window. Just wanted to let you know we reviewed the mulch guidelines. Light sienna is now officially an approved color. Elias chuckled. Thanks, Harold, but I think I'm sticking with the ocean salt look for a while. Fair enough. By the way, Harold hesitated. The audit came back. Brenda's brother is going to have to pay back about $40,000. She's moving out, selling the house. Elias stopped buffing the boat. He looked at the flag waving in the breeze. He didn't feel a sense of triumph, he felt a sense of justice. I hope she finds a place where she can be happy without needing to control everyone else, Elias said. You're a better man than me, Harold said. See you at the barbecue on Saturday. We're having it in the community property, the real kind. I'll be there, Elias said. I'll bring the coleslaw, my wife's old recipe. It's got a bit of a kick to it. As Harold drove away, Elias turned his attention back to his boat. He thought about the ocean, about the vast, uncontrollable blue that didn't care about bylaws or property lines. He thought about Sam and how much his old friend would have loved to see that meeting. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He had a new message from Marcus. DA is moving forward with the case. Good job, Uncle, you really recorded everything. Elias deleted the message. He didn't need the recordings anymore. He didn't need the evidence. He had his peace. He climbed into the boat, sat in the captain's chair, and looked out over his yard. The grass was a little long. There were a few weeds near the fence. The bird feeder was overflowing with sunflower seeds, and a bright red cardinal was happily gorging itself. It was imperfect, it was messy, it was home. And as the sun began to set, Elias Thorne, retired Coast Guard, stood up and gave his flagpole one last salute. The HOA queen was gone, her reign ended by the very words she had used to build her throne. In the end, she was right about one thing: the community property was important. But it wasn't the grass or the mulch or the paint colors. It was the respect they owed to one another and the freedom to live without fear. Elias walked inside, the sound of the flag snapping in the wind following him like a whisper of well done. Would you like me to write a follow-up story about how the neighborhood changed under the new leadership, or perhaps another, veteran versus bureaucracy, tale?